I watched a man save $400,000 over 30 years. He clipped coupons. He drove the same truck for 2 decades, patched the upholstery himself rather than replace it. He never once ate at a restaurant he hadn't researched the prices of first, and if the menu had changed since his last visit, he'd order the same thing anyway, out of habit more than hunger. He kept receipts in a shoebox going back to 1994, and he could tell you, without looking, exactly what he'd paid for a gallon of milk in any given year. The number was practically tattooed on him. His neighbors called him careful. His own family called him tight, though never to his face. And on the day he retired, after 31 years of doing almost everything right, he had less than he would have had if he'd done almost nothing at all. Less than a man who'd spent freely the entire time. That's not a mistake. That's not bad luck, and it's not a market downturn that caught him at the wrong moment. That's what happens, reliably, predictably, every single time, when frugal becomes the whole plan. My name is Savio. I've spent most of my life around people who built real money, and people who spent their whole lives being careful with it and ended up with nothing to show for the caution. Today I want to tell you why the second group is far larger than the first, and it's not because they lacked discipline. It's because discipline was the only tool they ever picked up. By the end of this, you'll understand the actual difference between being frugal and being wealthy, because they are not the same skill, and confusing them is the single most common trap I've watched good, careful people fall into. It is also one of the hardest traps to see from the inside, because it doesn't look like failure while it's happening. It looks like virtue. I've sat across kitchen tables from people in their 60s doing this math for the first time, out loud, and watched their own face change as the number came out smaller than they'd assumed for 30 years. I've also sat across from people half their age who somehow ended up ahead of them, not because they were smarter, not because they earned more, but because somebody, early, told them which ledger actually mattered. That's the difference I want to hand you today, for free, while there's still enough runway left for it to matter. Let me tell you about the man from the coupons. I'll call him Walt, because that was close enough to his name and he'd rather not be recognized. Walt worked at a parts plant for 31 years. Same job, same shift, same lunch pail, an actual metal lunch pail, the kind you don't see much anymore, dented on one corner from being dropped off at tailgate sometime around the Reagan administration. He was, by every measure his neighbors used, the most responsible man on the street. When the rest of the block was financing boats and kitchen remodels, Walt was clipping the Sunday coupons and driving 40 minutes out of his way for gas that was 6 cents cheaper. He timed it, too. He knew which day of the week the station on Route 9 dropped its price before the one closer to home did, and he planned his errands around it. He did this for 3 decades. Not on and off. Not when money was tight and forgotten when things loosened up. Every week, for 31 years, with the same seriousness a lot of people reserve for their actual jobs. And when he finally sat down with a number on paper, a real financial advisor, a real spreadsheet, the kind of appointment he'd put off for years because he already knew he was fine, the number was smaller than what a coworker of his had built in the same 3 decades. This coworker spent freely, ate out twice a week, took his family on a real vacation every summer, and never once clipped a coupon in his life. He wasn't reckless. He just didn't think about money the way Walt did. And he still came out ahead. Not by a little. By a wide enough margin that when Walt first heard the number, he assumed the advisor had made an error and asked her to run it again. That coworker didn't outsave Walt. He didn't even come close. By Walt's own estimate, the man probably spent twice what Walt did over those same 30 years. What he did was put 12% of every paycheck into an index fund the week he started at the plant, and never touch it. He didn't watch it daily. He didn't check it during downturns and panic. He didn't tinker with it, rebalance it obsessively, or try to time when to add more. He forgot about it in the specific way you forget about a bill that's already been paid automatically, the way you stop thinking about a mortgage payment once it's on autopay, and that forgetting, that simple structural absence of decision-making, turned out to be the entire strategy. Walt's discipline went into the wrong ledger. He was optimizing the 6 cents on gas, the store-brand ketchup, the thermostat set 2 degrees lower than comfortable, while the real math, the compounding math, the kind that works in the background whether you're paying attention to it or not, sat completely untouched for 31 years. Nobody ever sat Walt down and told him there were 2 different games being played with the same paycheck. He assumed there was only one, and he played it as well as it could possibly be played. I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for Walt. Walt is fine, nobody's living in a cardboard box here. He's telling you this story himself, at diners, right now, to anyone who'll sit still for it, usually somewhere between the coffee refill and the check. There's no self-pity in how he tells it anymore, just a kind of bewildered honesty. I'm telling you this because Walt is not rare. Walt is the majority. I have met 100 versions of Walt for every version of the coworker, and that ratio should worry you more than it probably does. His wife told me once that the hardest part wasn't the number itself, it was realizing that 31 years of Sunday mornings spent clipping coupons at the kitchen table could have been spent almost any other way, doing almost anything else, and the outcome would have been better, as long as that 12% had gone in automatically from the first paycheck. Not because the coupons were wasted time exactly. Because the coupons were never where the actual leverage was. Walt still clips them, by the way. Old habits don't apologize for themselves and leave. But these days he tells anyone who'll listen to set up the automatic transfer first, and worry about the 6 cents on gas only after that's already handled. Here's the myth, stated plainly, that if you are careful enough, disciplined enough, frugal enough, the money takes care of itself. It doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is not a personal failing. It's a structural one. I meet people constantly who describe their frugality like it's a finish line instead of a starting gate, as if once you've mastered not spending, the rest handles itself, quietly, somewhere in the background, without anyone needing to build anything on purpose. It doesn't work that way, and it never has. You can be the most disciplined person alive at not spending money and still end your life with less than someone who was mediocre at saving but simply pointed what little they saved in the right direction. Discipline is necessary. It has just never once, on its own, been sufficient. Frugality has a floor. There's a limit to how little you can spend, because you still need to eat, live somewhere, and function as a person. Once you hit that floor, there is nothing left to optimize. You've saved what you can save, and no amount of additional willpower moves that number any further. Wealth building has no ceiling. It is not bounded the same way. A dollar that is invested does not care how careful you were getting it there, it grows the same whether it came from a coupon or a bonus, from 6 cents saved on gas or $600 that arrived without any effort at all. So when someone puts all their energy into the bounded game, how little can I spend, and none of it into the unbounded one, how can this money grow, they are, mathematically, guaranteed to plateau. Not might. Will. That's the myth. Careful is not the same as wealthy. Careful has a ceiling built into how a human life works. Wealth does not. I want to be precise about what I'm not saying. I'm not telling you frugality is worthless, or that Walt should have eaten out every night and skipped the coupons entirely. Cutting waste is fine. It's good, even, up to the point where it's actually waste. The mistake isn't that Walt was careful. The mistake is that careful was the entire strategy, start to finish, with nothing else running alongside it. A floor under your spending and a ceiling on your growth are 2 completely different tools, built for 2 completely different jobs, and using only one of them is like trying to build a house with just a level and no hammer. Ask yourself, honestly, which tool you've actually been reaching for over the last 5 years, and how long it's been since you last reached for the other one at all. Let's put a real shape to this, because I don't want you to just believe me, I want you to see it. Say you're able to cut $200 a month out of your spending through pure discipline. Coupons, driving for cheaper gas, skipping the extra subscriptions. That's real. That's not nothing. Over 30 years, saved in a drawer, that's $72,000. Now say instead of finding that $200 through cutting, you found it by starting 10 years earlier, same amount, same $200 a month, but you let it sit in something that grew at a historical market average instead of a drawer. I'm using round numbers on purpose, and a long-run historical average on purpose, because I want this to be a demonstration of the mechanism, not a prediction about next year. The market will have bad years. It will have years that make you nervous enough to want to check the balance daily. That's not the point here. The point is what happens to the exact same amount of discipline once you change only one variable, where it's allowed to sit. Notice, too, that nothing about this requires you to find extra money you don't already have. It's the same $200 either way. The only cost is the one nobody likes paying, which is patience, the willingness to let a number sit somewhere you can't see it working, trusting that it's working anyway. That same $200 a month, invested instead of hoarded, over 30 years, doesn't get you $72,000. It gets you something closer to $400,000, depending on the years you're in. Same discipline. Same $200. The only thing that changed is which ledger it went into. This is why Walt's numbers looked the way they did. He was extraordinary at the bounded game and never played the unbounded one. Nobody sat him down and showed him the two numbers side by side, not once in 31 years, not a coworker, not a banker, not a single Sunday coupon insert. If they had, I don't think he would have chosen the drawer. I think he would have chosen exactly what his coworker chose, because Walt was never afraid of commitment. He was simply never shown there was a second door in the room at all. So if you've recognized yourself in Walt even a little, and most careful people will, here's what I want you to actually do about it. Not someday. This week. Shift 1, set a floor, not a ceiling, on your frugality. Decide the minimum standard of living you're comfortable with, and once you're at it, stop optimizing there. Write the number down if you have to. The energy you were spending finding 6 cents a gallon, redirect every ounce of that energy toward the second shift, because that energy was never the problem, only where it was pointed. Shift 2, automate the unbounded game before you feel ready. The reason people delay investing is they're waiting to feel like they have enough discipline, enough knowledge, enough safety, enough certainty about what happens next in the market. You do not need any of that to start. You need an automatic transfer, on the day you're paid, before you see the number in your checking account. Walt had 31 years of discipline. What he didn't have was one decision, made once, to automate, a single afternoon he kept postponing in favor of 100 smaller decisions he never once postponed. Shift 3, measure yourself by the ledger that has no ceiling. Stop tracking how much you didn't spend. Start tracking how much is growing without you touching it. That single change in what you measure changes what you optimize for, and what you optimize for is what you become extraordinary at, whether you mean to or not. Most people never make this shift because nobody ever told them it was a shift to make. They assumed the ledger they grew up watching, the one their parents checked, the one that only ever goes down, the one that rewards restraint and nothing else, was the only ledger there was. It isn't. It was just the only one anybody ever showed them. One more practical note, because I'd rather you actually do this than just agree with it. If you can only automate one of the 3 shifts this week, automate the second one. The floor and the measurement will follow naturally once money is already leaving your account before you can talk yourself out of it. Set the transfer for the day after payday, not the day of. Give the paycheck a moment to actually land first, and set it as a fixed amount you won't second-guess every time a slow month shows up. Here's the part most people skip past, and it's the part that matters most. Walt wasn't undisciplined. He wasn't foolish. He was, by every definition his generation used, doing everything right. That's what makes this dangerous. You can do everything you were taught to do, perfectly, for 30 years, and still end up behind. Not because you failed. Because you were handed the wrong scoreboard, and nobody ever told you there was another one being kept in a different room the entire time. The people who end up ahead are rarely the most disciplined people in the room. They're the ones who figured out, earlier, which game was actually unbounded, and put their discipline there instead. It's a smaller shift than it sounds like, and a bigger one than most people ever make. You already have the discipline. Walt proved that people like you can sustain it for 30 years without complaint, without wavering, without ever once needing to be reminded. The only question left is which ledger it's going into. I think about the scoreboard metaphor more than almost anything else in this work, because it explains something that used to confuse me: why smart, careful, genuinely good people can look at their own finances and feel like failures despite doing almost everything they were told to do. They weren't failures. They were reading the correct effort off the wrong dial, faithfully, for decades, because the wrong dial was the only one anyone had ever pointed them toward. That's not a character problem. It's an information problem, and information problems are the easiest kind to fix, the moment somebody's willing to say the quiet part out loud. If this is the first time you've heard the difference between frugal and wealthy stated this plainly, good. That means you still have time to move the discipline you already have into the ledger that compounds, instead of the one that simply subtracts. It's not too late to redirect 31 years of exactly the kind of consistency Walt showed. Most people who hear this today aren't starting from nothing, they're starting from a habit that already works, just aimed at the wrong target. I'll be back next week with the second half of this, the exact order to automate things in, so you're not guessing which account gets the money first. Because knowing the two ledgers exist, and knowing which order to build them in, are two different pieces of knowledge, and only one of them actually moves money. Until then, take care of the ledger that has no ceiling. If you only do one thing after watching this, don't make it a promise to yourself for someday. Open the account, set the transfer, and let it run on its own before the day is over. 31 years from now, you want to be the version of this story that got to choose which one he was, not the version who found out on the day it was already too late to change it. Both men in this story worked just as hard as each other. Only one of them worked the compounding math as hard as he worked everything else, and that's the only gap left standing between where you are and where 31 years of exactly the effort you're already putting in could actually take you.